sharing your thinking there.
Sleeping Queens.
That is Sleeping Queens, yeah. Questions so far about the two things I've said so far? They making sense or they're total BS? I'm willing to fight.
Makes sense.
Okay, we'll keep going. The next one, I don't have a fun picture, but problem solving in context. For me, again, for someone to be, I'll use math, but the same is true of science. If you want someone to be a user of STEM habits of mind, there are three sort of components you have to fulfill: sensitivity, inclination, and capacity. So sensitivity is noticing that this is an opportunity to use this way of thinking. Inclination is you care enough to actually apply it, and capacity is what most traditional schools focus on solely, which is, can you process the numbers, for example? Can you do the thing? Problem solving in context gives us a chance to develop the sensitivity and inclination in students so that capacity actually matters. The problem we have so often, and I say we, meaning education writ large, is we spend a lot of time focusing on capacity and then wonder, why aren't they putting this in long-term memory? Why aren't they using this? Why don't they ever go in that bag of tricks and draw out the Pythagorean theorem when they could? So this is an opportunity to say we're creating a space where these things are live and matter. So creating positive experiences to help them do problem solving in context. A couple of the ones I like up here: needing math to survive. Imagine counterfactuals. So this is actually a good one for history too, and often, you think of, like, has anyone ever read Harry Turtledove, writing alternate histories? Mm-hmm. They're really fun and interesting, but imagining the branching path of causality. What happens if I take method X and method Y? Planning ahead, and although I don't know that it's a STEM habit of mine, that leads to better executive function. The more you're thinking about, if I take this opportunity to do this action, these are the follow-on consequences. Optimizing. So this is the key. Again, you said you teach robotics. This is the key to engineering, right? How do I do the most with the least materials? And in games, they often talk about something called min-maxing, which is the idea that you're trying to max out your character in the how would you describe it?
It's more like a gradient descent sort of approach. So it's we break a lot of stuff just to get the parts so we can make new things.
Okay. So yeah, using the doing the best with the least amount of resources, yes, essentially. And so when you think about designing a character, for example, you're weighing: do I want a fast, lightweight weapon that does less damage? Do I want a heavy weapon that's slower but does more damage? And trying to think about those things is the kind of critical thinking that we want kids to have as they move into adulthood and are solving difficult STEM-related or science-related problems. So if we think about a huge problem like global warming, you've got people who are talking about geoengineering. They're saying, oh, if we shoot some sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, that'll block out the thing. Well, we need those people to be thinking not only about the consequences, but is this the most effective method to do what we want to do? And that means trying out counterfactuals. That means optimizing the results and thinking about what the costs are. If you think about managing resources, games like King of Tokyo or Bonanza or Settlers of Catan, games where you're acquiring resources, trading resources, all of that is, again, in this mathematical mindset. And then thinking critically all the time, understanding how the rules interact, contingent choices and conditionals. This is where actually STEM literacy and literacy overlap in thinking critically and thinking about how you interpret. So, thoughts about these real quick? Questions?
How would you conceptualize the whole needing, like, in games it's easy to see why you would need math to survive, but when you're trying to teach a class of high schoolers, like, oh no, this is a necessary skill, like how do you approach?
So part of the issue is a lot of the math we teach in high school isn't necessary to survive, and that's why we have such a hard time contextualizing it. Mm-hmm. So you think about Algebra 2, for example. Again, I love it, and I also recognize that no one needs it. And so that's a real problem. I think this is a different talk and a different thing, but what I would do is I would say, how do we take something like data analysis interpretation and re-break Algebra 2 as a data class? So basically saying, can we do it all in Excel spreadsheets the whole year so that they learn a skill that actually is useful and matters while filling the requirements that we're trying to do. It's not related to this, but that's a particular bugbear of mine is the math cycle that we do in schools.
There's actually an Atlantic article about algebra.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think I might have read that one.
People desperately want Excel skills and have no use for almost any of the math they learned in school.
We did a math night recently, and I asked, and I'm totally off topic, but I enjoy this topic so I can't help myself. We asked the whole room, so we had 25 or 30 adults in there, and we said, okay, how many of you factor polynomials in your daily work?
Right.
Nobody. How many of you use Excel spreadsheets and work on data in your daily work? All the hands went up. So yeah, and there's a lot of talk, Jim, about college, right? And the number of kids who don't succeed at college due to the math requirement.
Right.
And it's becoming an equity issue. Anyway, so I don't know the answer to how to make Algebra 2 seem real world, but what I do think is, I think you'd find a high correlation, and I won't say causation, between the kids who are excited about those topics and excel at them, and kids who play things like D&D and these kind of nerdy games. And I think there's something to the idea that being in that headspace where you spend a lot of time thinking about numbers and optimization and probabilities and whatever, it becomes more live in your life.
You can also make the case for learning second-degree equations when you're learning physics. Not like a year and a half before you get physics.
Right. Definitely. Anytime you can contextualize something, and I was talking to someone earlier about conceptual physics, and that idea, was it you, Esme? Esme, right?
Yes.
Talking about conceptual physics and needing the math, like it becomes live at that point.
Right.
So that's really interesting. That actually leads really well into this one, this idea of models. And maybe that helps be part of the discussion. So the thing about models is they're abstracted and simplified versions of reality, right? And so you're trying to quantify something so that you can analyze, interpret, and spit out a result. So, for example, what does it take to model a person, right? How many traits do you need? So in D&D, we've got 6 traits, right? Some systems have fewer. GURPS has 4 traits. You could imagine a system where someone says, well, this is not an effective, so we have strength, dexterity, constitution, which is like your physical health, right? Intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. It's easy to imagine saying, well, this doesn't get at the full texture of a human. We need more traits than this. So you get in the realm of saying, how many traits is still abstract without becoming unwieldy? Do we need 10 traits? Do we need 30 traits to model a person? Is there some sort of matrix of traits that's the best model of people? So that idea of trying to find something and abstract it down. The reason I like this picture, has anyone ever played Dots and Boxes? It occurred to me one day that this is the most abstracted war game I've ever played, because you're trying to take over territory over the course of the game, and so you're strategically thinking, how can I cut off their supply lines and take more territory? So games as a way to develop as modelers. So those are kind of the habits of mind. I'm going to go into a second piece, which is what I call STEM culture. And this is where I was saying people who play these games sort of get in that nerdy headspace, like they self-identify like, oh, I play nerdy things, so it's okay for math to be cool for me. The first one is geeking out. So a couple of things about geeking out is in playing games, there's really no use. Yeah, this is the one where my wife said, do games create nerds or nerds create games?
That's your son.
That's my son, Noble. Yeah, this is him a couple of years ago. But there's no use playing it cool, playing games. You know, there's no sense of like too cool to play, because if you are the game space, that magic circle sort of falls apart. Games reward failure, iteration, re-engagement. They engage experimentation and trying something new. And again, the more you can make those things live in someone's life, and not painful, but fun in someone's life, the better. Also, I really believe that gameplay leads to people modding games and then creating games. And again, that's what I call the creator mindset. So you, I'll keep going back to D&D, it's just such an easy example. You start playing, someone else is the dungeon master, right? You're just a player, but then you get the itch, right? You want to run your own campaign. You design your own campaign. Some people go from that to designing their own gameplay system, because they go, well, D&D was great, but I want something more simulationist, like GURPS, where it's, you know, you have to roll to break down a door rather than, or I want to go the other direction and be more of a story game where I'm not so interested in modeling physics in a game. I'm more interested in keeping the story alive. Point being, this idea of a creator mindset, you start by being just a player, and then you go, I think I could make this 10% better if I did this other thing, or I had a house rule, or I modified it in some way. And I think a lot of times that leads people to want to actually be a creator. So that's good. Another thing I think is really important, games are a forum for rough and tumble play, right? So the ability to have a rough and tumble play that's intellectual play. And one of the things that really caused me to think about this, my wife was playing Dots and Boxes with a 10-year-old girl somewhere a few years ago. And she noticed over the course of the game that this girl was, she was trying not to win. She was letting my wife win. I assume there was social pressure for her to sort of get along, or to create, to not, I'm not even sure how to put it exactly, but to not take too much. And I think one of the things that's nice is, in the space of games, there's the opportunity to stand up for yourself, to advocate for your position, to fight and win without feeling like you're compelled to take a step back and let someone else take the space. Is that making any sense? It's kind of...
I mean, you're saying that it does have that, but in the time your wife played with the other person, it didn't work for that other person.
What I'm saying is, I think if that little girl had had more practice in the world of playing games where, you know, you're cutting the other person's throat to win, or you're a little more standing up for yourself in the space of the game, I think that would have been a benefit. Does that make sense? Not quite? Not buying it?
No, I mean, just that example was a counterexample to the thing you were talking about.
Yes, the example was the counterexample that made me realize how important it is to create a space for rough and tumble play, rough and tumble intellectual play. And a place to highlight, like, you might not even know that's going on, but you could go, hey, wait a second, I noticed that you're stepping back instead of stepping forward here, and create a space to encourage, like, no, don't give away the win, you know, fight for it. You have the ability. And the thing I want to show next is, I'm calling it the STEM Thinking Safari. I have some little video bits that I want to show, and then we can talk about if we see anything interesting. So let's see. Do I have sound?
That's a big question.
That's a big question. If we don't,
I'm your guy. If you don't, I can.
If we don't,
Yeah.
and can I play?
Tell a couple jokes and I'll have it going. No time. I'll get choked up.
You know what? Here, I might be the problem. Hold on, 1 second. I might be muted. Here we go.
No.
Nope.
Yeah. Give me a second.
Sure thing. Has anyone ever played Flux? Yes?
Yes.
a good name.
Do you play the basic one? Do you have some of the other ones?
No, I just played it once, the basic one.
The basic one?
Yeah.
This is a really interesting game because there's so many different modifications of it. So there's a base game, and then I must own 20 different versions. I may not have that.
You don't have one of those?
I
You do? No, you
I
have
do.
one. But we gotta turn you all around and stuff. Is
That's
that
all
okay?
right. That's good.
Let me pull this over.
I did not mean to make this.
That's a good sign, though.
Yeah, that means something's happening.
Yeah,
Here.
try now.
All right, let's get us back to this. And anyway, Flux is a great one for playing and then creating modifications. So, all right, let's try this. Can you pull that side just a little forward?
Is there sound there supposedly?
No, this.
Okay, you can hear it. Oh, you can hear it.
Put your volume up.
One more card. You get 2 more cards.
All right.
No. You get 4 more cards. I get 4 more cards. You get 3 more. Because you already drew 1, so it's 3. Just saying. No. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6. This is not right. Sorry. So, what about how many do I draw? 4. Wait. Oh, you do not. You draw 4. Yeah, you draw 4, yeah. That's what you just said.
All right. Oh, don't do that. Don't go forward. So thoughts there. I noticed that my son is kind of pushy in that one. That's what I noticed.
Draw 4. Yeah, you draw 4, yeah. That's what you just said.
My son's a little pushy, but the thing that I like is his friends push back on him. That's what stood out to me in that one. Other thoughts?
The gatekeeping is interesting.
Gatekeeping?
Yeah, like you're only allowed to do these things, and it's just like wait, like because the other girl was like, no, like you just said this is what she's supposed to do. Like why are you stopping her? And the fact that these kids are at such a young age are able to check each other without being angry or violent or anything like it's interesting because it's within the realm of the game, right? Like
So
there's a set of rules that you have to abide by because you're playing this game. So within that, like, it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. If it's not by the rules, then you.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I like the fact that it created a space where Sophia, the girl on the left, my son Lincoln can be a little bit like, but the fact that she felt empowered to say, no, Lincoln, you're wrong. He's one who will, he'll intellectualize at someone to like browbeat them a little bit, but it gave her the opportunity to push back. I thought was interesting and important and deserved practice for her. So, anything else?
I felt a little frustration from the girl who was like, wait, what? What do I do?
On the right, yeah.
That would be me in the game. Like, I want to trust you if you're the expert, but then like make sure you know what you're saying, because I want to know,
Mm-hmm.
right, and do the right thing.
She just wants to play.
Yeah.
She just wants to be involved.
Let's keep going. Has anyone ever played Magic?
Nope.
No?
Kind of.
A little bit?
Used to watch my brother play.
Okay.
There's so much money in those decks.
Oh, yeah. Let's see what we got here.
I'll play Fortuitous Find, returning from my graveyard to my hand. Him? Walking Ballista, I think. And I will also return... You can't return 2 unless they're artifacts. This is a creature, and this
So-
is an artifact.
My other son, who you'll see in a second, he's in 3rd grade at this point.
Yep, both types.
Wait, the other one?
Look at this one.
He's in
Hey, look at
5th or
this. This
6th.
rush of vitality, he could have made a better play by going like this. He could have put it on his Highlander Drake, 5 damage to me, and then he would have gained 5 life. Well, I could offer Send-Gear Vampire, which is a 4/4 flyer, I believe.
No, why do you say that's a better play?
Because then he could have gained more life and dealt more damage. But not...
So, Thoughts about that one?
The critical thinking was good.
Yeah. Doing something, you know, I'm not sure what he's doing exactly, but he's doing some kind of critical thinking, right?
Counterfactual.
Oh, good, counterfactual, right. Trying a different approach if he'd done this other thing, and back to minimizing, maximizing, trying to figure out how can I get the most out of any individual action. If you've ever played the game Magic, there's a lot of resource management in it as well, as you're tapping lands for power to play cards. You have to really weigh, what am I doing? I have one more little segment that I'll do just because I got it. Let's see, King of Tokyo. I won't play all of this one, but I'll play a little bit of it. Anyone ever played King of Tokyo? This one's a particular favorite.
Why are you reacting that way?
Because she didn't do it right. I know.
What does that mean?
She took that. She should.
Why would she keep one energy? She's going to get victory points for that. I mean, if you
Literally, I just didn't keep that.
no, take the health. That way you can
Take
heal.
the health.
Yeah. I would not take the health if I were you.
Wait, did anyone hurt me? Wait, no one hurt me.
Yeah, you took one damage.
I don't.
You don't get any of those.
Definitely this. Okay. Wait, what do I do when I get? I'm good.
Give me my energy.
Well, tell us what you're doing.
I was rolling. Keep the life. Okay, I'm keeping this life. Okay, and I'm gonna roll all of these again. See, okay, so I'm gonna take this. I'm taking this, and I'm gonna roll this again for my third turn.
Why are you keeping those?
Cause
How do you
then
decide?
I could damage Sophia and maybe kill her.
No.
And I would be able to redeem myself.
I think yay.
Yay! I get. Okay, I'm gonna just keep it like this, so I get star, right? Okay. When you score 3 2s, your attack deals 2 extra damage. No. Gain 1 extra star or victory point when beginning the turn in Tokyo. Deal 1 extra damage when dealing any damage from Tokyo. On a turn when you score 3 1s, you can take another turn with 1 less die. So if I go into Tokyo, I would get 2 stars on this one when beginning the turn.
So she's got to spend these little energy to buy these cards. So she's trying to weigh out.
If I'm in Tokyo, I would give you guys 1 extra damage when dealing any damage
you
from
want this
Tokyo. Yeah.
You are the weakest link. Sorry.
All right. So, what about in that last one, King of Tokyo? Anything jump out?
I think it was your son, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Having the conversation at the beginning. I think something that's interesting in that is that in the gameplay, not only do you have to look and see and know what you need to do to win, but he was saying, but if she had done this, so it's kind of also that strategy in realizing that the other person, it's keeping track of what they're doing and being able to say, you know, they need to do this for them to win, and I need to find a way to stop it. And I, you know, those are real life skills, but
Right.
just in that simple example of it,
In that
you're keeping track of what the other person is doing and not doing, and when they're doing something that they shouldn't have done, which is going to give you a benefit.
Yeah, being aware of that. Again, for me, so much of what I like about this is the idea of the habitualness of it. Like, the more you're playing games like this, the more you're developing that habit of approaching it that way. Other thoughts? I just like how much the girl who was trying to decide which card to buy, she was really processing, like, I'm spending my resources on this card. What are the outcomes going to be if I do this? I like that she read that first and was like, no, don't want that one.
think it was nice the other kids gave her that time to think through it. In class, you don't always have that. One kid's not getting the right answer, all the other kids are like, oh, let me say.
Mhm.
Here they were all like giving her that space to think over her options and
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't noticed that.
process it.
No. It's really hard for me to do, to give people space to think.
It's tough. Yeah. I remember hearing like there's a thing when teachers ask the question to students, we never give them more than like, it's like less than a second for who you're gonna call on. You're supposed to wait like 3 seconds because some kids it just takes them time to confirm the answer.
Mm-hmm.
You usually always just quickly pick. If they don't know it, you go to the next one. And really give them that time to process it and think it over.
I read my oldest is, sorry, just free form ramble, but my oldest is getting ready to go into high school, and so I went and I visited a high school out in the valley, close to us, that has this program that's really lauded. Everyone's like, this program's so great. Go to see it, and I go into one of their star teachers, and he was a social science teacher, and he was having the best one-man show of his life. He was up there, and he'd be like, so this means the Greeks are what? That's right, they're doing such and such. And the kids were just furiously writing as fast as they could. And I just thought, there is no way any kid in this class is processing or internalizing any of this, because every time he asks a question, he immediately responds with what he wants the answer to be. It was very frustrating. Needless to say, he's not going there. So I didn't know I was going to have a full hour and 10 minutes, so I blazed through what I want to talk about. But I'm happy to just sort of explore this idea. Is anyone moved? Anyone think this is totally wrong and dumb?
You
want to talk through some games?
Do you do this in class, or are you just encouraging general kids to play more games at home?
Well,
What's the idea?
Excellent. So both. At our little school, we do have a fair amount of opportunity for kids to play games in class. It's never enough, for my opinion. You get focused on getting through the things you want to get through, and so the idea of just, hey, we're going to take an hour and play a nerdy game that takes an hour to play is sometimes hard in the min-maxing of the classroom, the cost-benefit analysis of school. Sometimes it's hard. So my goal today was to do two things. One, to give some grist for the thinking, so that when you're talking to parents and they're like, what can I do to help my child achieve better in STEM, to just go, hey, have you considered just playing some games as a family? Great, you get to connect as a family, everyone sits down and looks each other in the eye, but also there's actual intellectual, school-related sort of benefits from this. Yeah.
I was thinking about executive functioning and just the voluntary mastery of these complex rules.
Lots of rule sets, yeah.
And working collaboratively to make sure that you've really got it right. And I know that's just one element of that sort of mastery and awareness of rules and constraints is just one element of executive functioning. But then I think about the neuropsych tests that we all read, I think, and the executive functioning tests that they give the kids,
right,
and how little they care about the task. And I'm kind of on a sort of how invalid those tests are, because I know the kids don't care about them and they're really angry to be there sort of kid.
Right.
If you had kids sit down like they were at your table, the disparity between the level of executive functioning there and the level of executive functioning you might see in a non-preferred classroom task or
so it goes back to engagement, right?
Yeah,
giving them a reason
just
to care.
The change in a kid's manifest capacity to do something when they're engaged.
Yeah, it's that
whether it's through
inclination.
games or some other thing that gets them engaged. It's a whole different brain that comes out, and we're so used to ranking and judging and categorizing kids based on how they perform on school tasks or simulated school tasks, which is what the neuropsych testing is. So, if the neuropsych testing could look more like
something
like that.
that gave them a reason to actually care about the executive function.
Yeah. Or started with something that they cared about, how different it would be and how different kids' lives would be in terms of the labels they receive or not receive.
Lucy?
Well, when they were talking about all the benefits of playing games, it sounded to me like I looked at that and I watched them. There are many of the things that some people get from sports, right? Some people get from sports.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, okay, so you could get that from sports, but maybe everybody doesn't. So part of what you were saying was that the girl who was playing the game had an opportunity to do this competitive skills, and she might not have done it in sports, or she might not have.
It's funny, my note for that says, on that slide says, like sports. So the only 10 degrees change I would make is this gives a chance where it's all those sports related sort of self-efficacy and standing up for yourself, but with a layer of sort of intellectual component.
Yeah, but I don't know if it matters.
Maybe I'm displaying a bias because I'm not a sports person.
Well, I mean, I
You can tell I have a bow tie on.
I have this game section compared to many others seems like one where you're talking about other skills that are more important than just learning facts. Like I went to one before and it had all these tools for doing matching, right?
Yeah.
We're like doing
Yeah.
false matching in a,
Yeah.
Fun way.
and somebody here told me earlier, well, nobody wants to play those games because it's not as good as a real game.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about here is really how games are related to the things that are really important that we really want people to learn. And it seems like one other piece is to pay attention to others, right? But I don't know if it's better, like if it's more intellectual because it's a game than it is it any more intellectual to think, can I shoot with my, like, do I have the skill to do that? I only have one chance with the ball.
Maybe
or
not.
to block, or like it seems like it's really
Maybe that's a bias I'm displaying.
like you might not need to know details of Magic the game later.
Right.
A lot of rules in American football, a lot of rules in soccer.
Oh yeah.
A lot of rules in baseball. A lot
Right.
of funny exceptions and gray
baseball's
areas.
very mathematical and statistic, right?
That, yeah.
But not when you're playing it. When you're just playing at the park, there's very little math and statistics in
No,
there.
that's true.
When you're following MLB or something,
Right,
you know,
or doing
kids
a
wake up in the
fantasy
morning
league.
with a newspaper and they're looking at all the
With the
stats.
scorekeepers.
That's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you go to the game, they give you that little thing to fill out because the game's so boring.
I guess
They
maybe
do.
that's where my
Guess the beer
bias
isn't
comes
enough.
from is these, years ago I went to a talk, where a guy was talking about using, Assassin's Creed to teach history, and he said, the problem is the mechanics of Assassin's Creed don't force you to learn the history, like it doesn't matter. He said, when I played Assassin's Creed, I walked out having learned something. I learned how to look into a room and spot handholds everywhere. And I knew how to jump from place to place because that's what you did to succeed in the game. And I guess to me, the difference between this and sports is, while there is a lot of rules and thinking involved, in the moment, those might not be germane to the success of what you're doing. Like, there's a lot of rules for football, but as a player, how many of those rules are you responsible for in that moment versus playing some of these nerdy games where the rule set is complicated and systemic and overlapping, it requires it. But again, I'm willing to own that may be a personal bias and not true in any sense.
But it also does seem like if the kid knows that game, you can learn from it. Like whatever the kid knows.
Right.
If you can figure out, if you can get in there and see what's in there in that thing, you can get those skills out. If it is a social thing for them to do, and they maybe aren't sort of meta about what they're doing, they're just playing the game, but that's what you.
Yeah.
Like you could give the kids graphs and then tell them go play a basketball game. Now come back and now mark down, how many shots do you take this game? What was your statistics? Now let's switch up the players and see if we can make the teams more fair based off the statistics, not based off what we think of each other. Like you could add that to it.
That
and have them
component.
do that.
Yeah.
I think these just have it more inherently obvious than sports might have it.
Right. And the thing that you said earlier about I'm interested in games to teach other things than the facts.
Yes.
Again, coming clean for myself, although I love facts personally, I recognize that the facts I love and have are different than every other person in this room. And I'm very much a believer in we all acquire the facts we need based on our interest in the things we do. So I'm much more interested in the higher level, like how do we critically think, how do we connect these things, how do we work together to make the most so that my set of facts and your set of facts build in synergy. So that's very much, again, my bias about what learning needs to look like.
Well, I'm curious what ideas anyone has about needing math to survive. I'm teaching basically Algebra 1 right now, and I'm trying to figure out a way to make it real for my students, and then I just plug it through a book.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of are like life simulations, where they make decisions based on like their money, their education, and how that affects how those life choices affect them down the line.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I can think of. That doesn't involve a lot of algebra per se.
I'll tell you something that we're doing at our middle school right now that's sort of interesting and sort of gamey. And we're still fleshing it out, so this will necessarily be a little vague. But I made some clear coordinate planes. So they're plastic, they're clear, they're about this 10 inches by 10 inches. And we're going to do a thing where there's scouts and a home base, and they're radio back and forth. So the home base has a picture of the campus, satellite picture with a coordinate plane overlaid, and they have a code book. And the people out in the field have these coordinate planes. And so they'll go to spots that the code book tells, they'll look at their code book, it'll say, hold this up at this, I'm trying to think how to describe it. So imagine in your code book you had a series of lines with points labeled on them, and you drew those on your clear coordinate plane, and then you hold them up to the horizon. They match up to things on the horizon. And then the book says point -10, -10. So you match it up on the horizon. Did anyone see the most recent Star Wars? You know how there's the dagger that she holds up and looks at? So imagine a real life version where you hold that up and you go to this point and then you walk to where that point is and find the next clue that you radio back. So again, creating an opportunity and then the people at the home base are drawing lines based on the points you find and connecting those lines to find new locations. So kind of an interplay between the coordinate plane, something like that. Trying to create embodied experiences where those mathematical concepts matter. That's a thing.
How about algebra, like equations and like variables is what I'm trying to think about how to gamify that.
Are you talking about like?
Like linear is one step.
Yeah.
Like one variable,
One variable. Yeah. Well, again, that's one of the things they're doing like slope intercept format. As a matter of fact, they're to figure out why m is the slope. I'm trying to connect it to the idea of mountain slopes for them, so they're actually looking at slopes of mountains that are around us out in the valley and doing the slopes of mountains. I don't know, it's hard because, like I said, when was the last time any of us did that in the real world? Every day?
Well, when I'm a psychometrician.
Oh, okay. But that's a great example. That's a great example, right?
What do you
Is you're taking data.
Psychometrician?
I think this is the exact answer. You're processing data and you're using those skills to do a real world thing. And this is what I said in the last session about using Excel to teach algebra. I think that's the way you do it, is you say, here's a data set, create the best fit line.
Better yet, have them collect the data set based on something they're interested in.
Exactly.
And see if it's linear. And if it is linear, then make extrapolations. And
yeah, like there's a...
We could play with that, that'd be fun.
I'm thinking about Zach, how to gamify Zach.
Yeah.
Because he just plugs through the book. And
Right.
I have students that are engaged like in the geeky part of math.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out a way to get them to make it real so that they can actually internalize it and feel like it has value, other than just the intrinsic value to them of like learning.
This is not gamey. I watched a video, and again, I'm not a sport person, so I'm going to totally mess this up, but it was talking about who the best players in basketball were, and it was all these statistics and graphs and but finding data sets they're interested in and creating an output that's based on that to prove a point. To prove who's the greatest of all time at whatever.
Just my experience. I didn't like math. Asian, the math education is pretty intense, so I guess I do have basic math skills. I can do it, but I didn't enjoy it. But if I had known that matrix algebra and calculus was so important to statistics and I'd be using it every day, I would have paid much more attention to it back then. I learned it, but I never knew. I was like, why would I learn it?
Why would anyone do this? And you probably, I imagine, had to relearn a lot of it whenever it became meaningful.
Yes.
Yeah. But that idea of statistics and data analysis, like that's an actual real skill that's the demand is going up. The rest of the sort of calculating the demand is almost zero and going down because we have computers that do that. You just have to be able to set it up.
But it seems like you have to pick up the number sense from knowing something first, right? Like, in a way, that's what you're saying with the game. Like, you know how the game goes, and you know what a life is worth, or what this weapon is worth, because you played it over, and you know when you get that one, you always win.
Yeah.
Then you're going back and saying, like, you pull that back to a model for math, right? You pull that back and see, oh, this is what it is, and then you can apply. Like, once you have an idea of the abstract, you can use math to read something and say, oh, that's what this is like, and I can tell whether it's important or not, right? But you don't have that in the beginning. You don't have, you get it, you roll the marble down the down the hill to see which one wins, right? If it's steeper or not, and then you get it, like the steeper one always wins.
All right, you graph that.
So then, oh, the steeper one wins for that. What about my height? You know, I started out this height. He's still taller than I am at the end of the semester.
So it's very constructivist, right? You're constructing the reason and the meaning.
And you can do a lot of that online with like Desmos, which Andrew, who works here, is a Desmos contributor. That might be a really good thing for you, even if you don't want to do a lot of like bringing in physical objects. There are Desmos things where you have to roll the marble. It's gamified. You have to roll the marble at the right. You have to create using an equation the right slope ramp, so that the marble gets enough momentum to jump up and land in the cup.
And I think PhET has those things too, PhET, which is like the physics, physics online sort of sandbox.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna send those.
I mean, the things I can think of, I have to make a linear equation if you had a larger class or don't, but measuring height versus standing height versus kneeling height, and there's a ratio for, I think, 3/4 or 2/3, whatever it is. 0.6, just say, right? And graphing that data out to try to find the slope of that to get the ratio.
And I think, correct me, what was your name? Yansu? I imagine that what's probably really important in that is having imperfect data sets, so that you can't, so they don't all match up, right? I mean, that's more real world. Would you agree?
Yeah, real data analysis.
Meaning, what do you do when your data set isn't perfect and you're still trying to create an equation that has the line?
Correlation, coefficient, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Just building a model, choosing your variables.
Right. Choosing which variables are the right ones and what are the ones that don't overcomplicate your model, create noise.
It's sort of interdisciplinary. I've had students make coordinate planes, draw a picture first, like a Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
And then map it out into a coordinate plane.
Do the equations for each line.
Yeah, or there's a number of ways you can do that. You can as simple as just find the coordinates and then make the list of coordinates to draw the picture coloring in. So there's an art connection. It's not as deep, but it's at least, it's in this interdisciplinary. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any way I can to make math more real for my students.
I think if you could find some connection, and it requires a lot of really processing, but games with maps where you are doing trajectories, and I don't necessarily even mean like ballistic trajectories, I just mean like, our base is here and we're trying to shoot over there, we're trying to direct our bombers to a target, or, they're all kind of war-based because that's what's occurring to me in the moment, but anything to create like, how do I move someone in space, I think there's a lot of fertile territory there that you might get kids. Drones. Yeah.
Now they have, like, in certain parts of Africa, they're so remote they don't have extra blood. So they'll send out, whenever little villages need some spare blood, they'll send out from the bigger cities drones with, packs of extra blood to bring it to them super quick, especially where the roads aren't good. So they have to, plan how they're going to get the drone from here to there, and the energy of how much blood it could carry versus how much batteries the drone could have, and kind of make it back, and the wind, and there's like so many different things.
Do you ever use games? Does anyone have examples of using the games like this, or encouraging them by having something social or intergrade, or like kind of a way to encourage people to play or try something new?
Bree, do you want to talk about your 5th graders and your kindergartners?
Sure. Can you just restate your question? I couldn't quite hear you.
Okay, so let's say I accept the premise, it's a good idea for people to play games like that, and partly it's because they're doing it with other people, and they'll, do you have any kind of mechanism for apart from just, okay, now, class, we'll play this game for an hour, do you have ways of encouraging people to play it within your school community, or?
We do at Sycamore. I teach kinder, and we have 5th grade, a partnership with our 5th graders. We play games in many ways. One is the whole school together. We put out games on Thursday mornings and kids play games. You know, that's what we do every Thursday morning. Another time is that when we get together with our buddies, in my classes maybe developing a game, the 5th graders help us play test. And we'll try out like 3 different versions, and we'll get feedback from the 5th graders, and they really love playing what we've created, and then their feedback we incorporate in and then reiterate on it the next time. And then, you know, we're beginning to work together to create games together. So I'm hoping that next year I might have something to share about multi-age games and building that makes it fun and exciting to collaborate on different age levels.
For us, we do a lot of design thinking stuff too. So, for example, last spring, our 3rd and 4th graders designed new field games. So again, played field games, used those, analyzed them. So they did a bunch of like writing and analysis and talked about fairness and what constitutes fair in a game, what works in a game. Then they created games, and then we're fortunate enough to have a connection to a PE coach at Crossroads, was it Crossroads? I don't remember. Anyway, they took them over and played it in a high school PE class. Our 3rd and 4th graders had high school kids play their games and give them feedback. And I'll tell you, the best outcome of that was our 3rd and 4th graders came back and complained about how those kids didn't pay attention and they were on their phones too much. So the games I thought were good, but that I thought was a good outcome too.
So kind of related to your question, what I am currently doing, I am a PhD student, so I'm working to become a statistician and a psychometrician, and I work with an institute at UCLA called PRESS. And right now we're working with PBS.
Is Gurley still there? Gurley? There was a woman named Gurley who used to work at PRESS.
Not familiar with her. But so I work with PBS, and right now they're really interested in digital games and the effects that it can have on learning. And so they've made a bunch of apps, and one of them is Cat in the Hat. Makes that or builds that. It's to build basic engineering skills within kindergartners. So how they do it is that you have a bunch of games that target skills like height and friction or sorting skills and all of that. And how they try to get people to, the children to continue playing the game is if you play it, you get seeds, persistent seeds. And then you can use those seeds to plant a garden, and then they grow stuff, and apparently that's interesting for 4th and 5th graders. And so that makes them continue to play the games, and I guess it helps to foster the skills that they're interested in. So that's like we have, in a digital context, we could give them rewards.
Are those seeds real seeds or digital seeds?
Digital seeds.
I think even real seeds actually.
Live action Farmville.
That's good. Better than a point.
Well, you get the point, and then they can plant it and see it grow, like, in a literal sense.
I think the thing is that like gamifying course subjects is more about a reward system for the students. Like games in and of themselves are a reward system because kids like to be right. Kids like to win. So within the context of teaching mathematics or science, we look at, okay, so here's a set of rules, and within this set of rules, anything goes. So go, like, do your best to win, because the kids aren't looking for, they're not looking for like prizes. They don't care about that. They just want to be the one who wins. So I think that in gamifying things like algebra or science, it's more like we want to like sneak in this context of like, oh, you're gonna learn something whether you like it or not, but